Hello. Quick more reactions before I go to sleep. Um, so I finally caught up on Star Wars Tales of the Underworld. This came out 5 months ago. Like I am way behind, so we won't spend too much time talking about this. I feel pretty decent episodes. I like the second half more than the first half. My big problem. Okay, so it's nice that we got like that clarification on how Sad Ventress was back in the Bad Batch, even though she died in one of the books between the Clone Wars and the rest of the show, rest of the franchise. And apparently, it's the power of love. Power of love resurrected her, which I mean, it's fine. It's Daphne, which is magic. Whatever. It's not massively important. It's enough of a specific enough circumstance that it doesn't break the whole if you're dead, you're dead kind of thing. It does stink of as Adventures. It's a very popular character, and now now that we know we're in a position to do more with her because we can do more Clone Wars and Clone Wars sequel stuff and stuff set between the Clone Wars and A New Hope. We should probably bring her back. It, obviously does like massively kind of like reek of that. And like I said, it's not that I have no issue with Asajj Ventress as a character. It just does kind of like it is very much a case of clearly we're bringing this character back because they're popular. That's fine. Moving on. I do like how they portrayed her. I do like that. I've not read the books, the Dark Disciple books, but from what I've just given a quick glance over it from on Wikipedia, it's established that she has a big kind of like moment of like light side, redemption, and like an epiphany, and so that kind of like correlates to what we see here, where clearly she just wants to be left alone, but is more willing to step in and like not stay out of the way of trouble, and like she doesn't hesitate to help this new young Padawan, Strata, when he gets into trouble, even if it means throwing away her peaceful life. She pretty much instantly does that, and like forms a very kind of mentor, caring relationship with him. Like I'm glad we didn't waste time going for this whole, like we've seen in Star Wars a lot. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We've done it all the time. The whole you're a burden, you're stuck on me, blah 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 blah. I'm only with you because I needed to be. We didn't get any of that kind of like like it. There was a kind of a threat of falling into a trope of that misunderstanding fallout thing that never happened either. They pretty much all both agreed to like hang out and trust each other, and I kind of appreciate we didn't have to like go through that tidal trope. But so we do see that. We see Strata show Ventress what it means to be a Jedi in a way which she probably hasn't seen really before. The whole like negotiating and making peace rather than falling into like balance. That was nice. But it kind of was like a non-story. Like it was all building up to them joining the path. And then Strata either misses it or chooses not to go, and it just kind of then like ends. It's like, well, what's the ending to the story? Like, I'm not saying that. Obviously, we know where Ventress ends up much later on, not necessarily where Strata ends up much later on. And I'm not saying there are many ways to end a story, but it was like, what was the point? Like, I guess it needs to be a point because it's an anthology, so we see a glance into this character's story, and we don't really get like a kind of like ending arc. But you know how Ahsoka's story directly kind of like told her reluctance to get back into the fight and then get back into the fight, whereas this felt like it was like half story, not really like an ending. So that's the reason why I like the second half. The second half didn't really answer anything. Well, no, that's not true. It answers as much as the first half did. Second half was basically a western, like through and through. It was Star Wars doing what Star Wars was best, taking a very kind of like taking loads of like tropes we already know and putting a Star Wars kind of twist on it. We find out that Cad essentially was someone who grew up on the streets, and as many people do when they grow up on the streets, gets caught in life of crime because the system fails them, and they're vulnerable for grooming by other gangs. That's essentially what happens. Nero, his best friend, gets arrested, and I guess decides that being a lawman is the best way to kind of improve society so that these aren't an issue. The episode wants us to believe he's probably right. He's a lawman, not in a all cops are bad sense, but lawman in a sheriff of a town sense, which I guess is not necessarily kind of falling foul of the historical reasons why cops are bad. So we can probably believe him on that. But yeah, they both. It's a mixture between a western and it's also the Blood Brothers. Just not fully the Blood Brothers of two people who grew up in similar circumstances, then get split apart and grew up in different circumstances, having to deal with the realities of their individual lives, and ultimately, for misunderstandings ensue. Aaron gets Cad arrested because she believes that he will fight his way out. He gets arrested. Aaron marries Nero for some reason that's not entirely explained why. Like, I guess if you take the Western tropes, it's because she has a child and so she needs that kind of support. But I mean, she must know that would have ended poorly for everyone. And yeah, you have it's the kind of the tragedy when Nero's like, I have to finish these things with my friend. And ultimately, we know that Nero's going to die because Bane can't, because we know he exists later on in the show. And we get a twist that Isaac is his son, which I didn't actually see coming. Maybe I should have. In reflection, it's not the most kind of out of the way twist, but I'm like, oh, but obviously it adds an extra tragedy to Cad Bane's character, but nothing in the long run. So they're both kind of interesting stories to have these characters. They're kind of like fan fiction in that they don't really matter, but they're fun looks into these characters. Anyway, I'm going to end there because it's 4 in the morning, and like I say, in about 5 hours' time, I've got to be awake. So this probably seems a good place to end. I have caught up on these two things. I've watched the first 2 episodes of Eyes of Wakanda, which I'm behind on. We'll probably end up watching the rest of those today at some point. And then we've caught up again. Okay, I'm going to bed now. Get out of my house.